see you everywhere. Oh, and I'll tell them girls I don't care. And if you're down, meet me anywhere. A place and time, tell me and I'll be there. Where have you gone? Let me know, I wanna know where you've gone. I'm gonna search for you all night long, screaming I wanna know where you've gone. I'm gonna search for you all night long, screaming I wanna know where you've gone. I'm gonna search for you all night long, screaming I wanna know where you've gone. Ain't gonna stop 'cause the love's too strong. Where do you hide? Let me know where you've gone. Where have you gone?
This presentation is for educational purposes only. With decades of experience supporting small and medium-sized businesses, TriNet has unique insight into HR best practices for businesses. TriNet does not provide legal, tax, or accounting advice. The materials in this presentation and the advice and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those prepared by the presenter and not necessarily those of TriNet, and the information may not apply to your company or scenario, so you should consult with your own advisors on how best to proceed. Reproduction in part or in whole is not permitted without express written authorization from TriNet. In the art of compensation transparency, managing sensitive discussions, we'll explore how to handle challenging conversations about compensation. Discover how to address difficulties, prepare effectively, manage employee reactions, cultural differences, and utilize tools to facilitate these important discussions. Please use the reaction emojis to welcome our presenters, Kristen Russum, Director Org Development, and Lynn Vu, Lead Org Development Consultant at TriNet.
Welcome. Lynn and I are part of the organizational development consulting team here at TriNet. We've partnered with thousands of organizations to help them reach their strategic goals. We work really closely with your leadership team to guide you towards your objectives. Together, we create an action plan with the stakeholders, breaking down big initiatives into manageable steps to keep you on track. We've got a full agenda today, and we're going to speak, as mentioned, around navigating challenging conversations about compensation specifically and provide you with some techniques to have an effective outcome. So let's get started, Lynn, and could you walk us through a definition of a courageous conversation?
Absolutely. So what's the goal? What is a definite courageous conversation? A courageous conversation refers to a frank, open, and often difficult dialogue about sensitive or challenging topics that could be uncomfortable or controversial, and that require honesty and vulnerability. The goal, what's the goal of a courageous conversation? The goal is to foster understanding, build trust, and create an inclusive environment by addressing issues directly and constructively. We believe that it's important to have this goal clearly in your mind when you set out to have a difficult conversation. The goal setting process that we're going to be talking about will help you gain clarity on your approach to the situation, help keep you kind of on track for the entire discussion. So why are these conversations important? Overall, we've uncovered that trust and transparency are major issues that leaders must work hard to fix. If employees are concerned with honesty about their career advancement opportunities and compensation conversations, then their motivation and drive to perform at a high level could be very limited, or they could be inspired to leave your organization and be successful someplace else. We're seeing these conversations being very important to employees. So why is it so challenging?
Yeah, we found a couple of reasons through our research around this topic. And The one, conflict avoidance. Many people avoid these conversations to prevent or avoid conflicts. They're concerned they might offend someone, create tension, or, damage the relationship. We also see just the whole concept of compensation sensitivity, particularly around compensation and money. It can trigger really strong emotions and making the folks that are in the conversation feel very vulnerable, maybe defensive, or even exposed. This could, make you feel bad. Maybe you don't want to talk about money, or the employee says they want more compensation, and so it's going to make them feel bad. So there's lots of emotions that get tied up into this. We see sometimes those power dynamics where employees find it challenging to open up around this topic with their management or their leader. And then, what about if you don't have the skills or the confidence to have and communicate your thoughts effectively, or particularly around this topic? We're going to talk and give you some tricks on how to maybe navigate this one with a little more finesse a little bit later. There may be some knowledge gaps, and you need to feel confident when you're communicating decisions about this area. And often we have found, and Lynn and I deal with this on a regular basis, where you're not as clear in your organization around what it is, how it's defined, and how it's articulated. And then lastly, we discovered, there's these issues around cultural differences. Varied backgrounds can lead to different perspectives and interpretations, making it harder sometimes to find common ground or to fully understand each other's point of view. Since the pandemic, we've seen, and I think everyone here probably on the call has had some exposure to expanding their geography and where they'll locate candidates and or folks to join their organization. So what impact does that have?
In a lot of different cultures, open or direct communication is highly valued. People are expected to advocate for themselves and present their case clearly when discussing salary. This kind of norm can contrast sharply with cultures where these kinds of directness or candor can be interpreted as disrespectful or even aggressive. So what we see is employers that are operating in multicultural environments need to be aware of these cultural dynamics to maintain that fairness. They should also recognize that for international workers, adapting to a local negotiation culture that's different from what they're used to may be a significant stressor, can impact job satisfaction and performance. How do you set yourself and your employees up for success? We'll go ahead and go to thank you. So by the end of a difficult conversation about compensation, you should be hoping to achieve the following types of outcomes. First is mutual understanding. Both you and the employee should have a clear understanding of each other's perspectives. The employee should understand the rationale behind their current compensation, any budget constraints, or whatever kinds of difficulties the organization is facing. Maybe the company didn't perform, maybe funding got cut, those types of things. The next is compensation clarity. The employee should leave the conversation knowing exactly why their compensation is set at its current level, what's needed for any potential increases, and any performance metrics or goals that need to be met for future compensation adjustments. If this is a performance issue, which we'll talk about in a couple of slides, they should understand the justification for the compensation discussion. The next is maintained or strengthened trust. Employees should feel that they were heard and truly respected during the conversation. The conversation shouldn't impact the working relationship in a negative way. The employee should leave feeling that even if they didn't get the outcome that they wanted, they were treated fairly and respectfully. Next is motivation and engagement, employee engagement. These conversations are difficult. That's the reason why we're having this conversation, this webinar. But employees should feel that they are valued, they're motivated, and that they are engaged with the organization. It's important to highlight their importance to the team and discuss their career development, help reinforce that commitment to the organization. If the compensation discussion is not performance related, you may want to talk about other options, areas where the employee can be successful, where they would have room for compensation growth. And then actionable next steps. Establish clear, actionable steps or plan moving forward. whether it's related to performance management, future compensation reviews, career development opportunities. This shows that you're invested in their growth and taking their concerns seriously. So let's break down the recommended steps to achieve these goals. We have identified a process that can help you with a successful conversation, and we'll go through kind of all of these steps and give you some more details. The first step really is prepare. Gather your data. Look at the employee's wage in relation to industry benchmarks, people in the organization that are doing the same or similar work, recent raises, bonuses. Be prepared as much as possible with data that can support your decisions. Think about the employee's performance, whatever they've been doing lately. Have a clear understanding of your company's compensation philosophy, which again, we'll talk about in a little bit. Whatever the budget constraints are, whatever the market standards are for the role. And then, set the tone. What do you hope to achieve is kind of really what you should have in the forefront of your mind throughout these entire conversations. Know your objective. Then schedule that meeting. Set up a formal meeting dedicated to discussing that compensation. This signals the importance of the conversation and allows both of you to prepare. Choose an appropriate setting. The environment should be private and free from distractions. I always recommend a face-to-face conversation or a video call if you're remote. And if it's in person, make sure that you avoid spaces where the employee is highly visible. I've typically said if you have a conference room that's nicknamed the fishbowl, that's not the right place to have these kinds of conversations. And then starting the conversation, begin with appreciation for the employee's contributions. Highlight their strengths, recent achievements, create that positive atmosphere. Tell them why you're having the discussion. Being direct helps manage that expectation and focus the conversation. Let's look at our next 4. Okay, so now you've gotten to the point where you have to actually deliver the message. You've prepared, you've gathered all your data, you've set the stage. Be transparent and honest and empathetic. Explain how the decision was made and what it reflects. If no increase is possible, explain the reasons clearly and directly. Hey, we've had some budget constraints. These are some performance considerations. Don't blame others. Don't blame the company. This is a business decision and you are representing the business. Present any relevant data or benchmarks that could support your message. For example, if the compensation aligns with market rates or internal pay scales, share that information. And then address the employee concerns. Use those active listening skills that we're going to refer to quite a lot. Give the employee the opportunity to share their thoughts and feelings. Listen without interrupting. Show empathy toward their perspective. And recognize the validity of their feelings or concerns, even if you can't meet their requests. Next steps. If the conversation involves performance issues, offer specific and actionable feedback for areas of improvement. Set clear, achievable goals for those future compensation discussions. And think about alternatives. If a wage increase isn't possible, think about other forms of recognition or compensation, additional responsibilities, professional development opportunities, flexible work environments, additional trainings, programs, courses, classwork, all of those different kinds of things. And then, set a timeline with those clear, actionable steps. Outline when the compensation will be reviewed again, if that's applicable. Provide a timeline, gives the employee something to work toward. And then, of course, closing the conversation. Summarize what you've just talked about. Recap the key points. Talk about decisions made. Confirm that both you and the employee are clear and fully aligned with the outcomes of the conversation. And continue to ask the employee to provide their perspective. I always thank the employee for their openness, their candor, their contributions. Expressing that gratitude helps them understand that their work is valued and appreciated. And of course, document the discussion. We're always going to recommend making a record of what was discussed, agreed upon, and next steps. And this can be helpful for future reference and clarity. So let's take a look at how this action plan could play out.
I think it's great. So Lynn and I, as mentioned, we deal with customers a lot. And this is a scenario that's come up quite frequently. Different expectations, budgetary constraints are 2 common drivers of sensitive compensation conversations. So in this instance, you're Luis's manager. Luis has been working at Jedco for 5 years and believes that he's dedicated to the job. Until this year, Luis worked for Amanda, who did not like to give feedback. Since you've become the manager, you've been, giving him feedback, and he's expressed frustration with what you provided. Amanda's never had a problem with it. So his work has decreased in productivity, even with your ongoing support. He's barely meeting those expectations, but you haven't given up hope on him. So here's where the rubber hits the road. The budget for salary increases is lower than in previous years, and you want to reward your top performers. Luis is not going to receive a raise this year, even though in the past he's consistently received a 3% raise. You're going to need to tell Luis he's not getting a raise this year. So Lynn, let's walk through how to put those action items that you talked about into motion.
Great, thanks. So remember, you want to prepare by reviewing your documentation and setting the tone. So think about these steps that we've given you may not always be done in an exact linear fashion. So I don't necessarily want you to have a list of the steps and go step by step in every single situation. This is going to be a conversation, and there's going to be some different dynamics. So you may have to kind of go back and forth between a couple of different areas and continue to set goals and offer support throughout the entire conversation. So a couple things, let's go through all of the different points, address the feedback transition, discuss current performance, talk about the budget limitations, talk about the communication, offer support, all of these different in the follow-up plan. So a couple ways that this could play out. Start the conversation with directing the information from the beginning. I understand that transitioning from Amanda's management style to mine has been a bit of an adjustment, especially with the increased feedback. My goal is to support your growth and help you succeed. Then you can move into something like, I've noticed that your productivity has changed recently, and while you're currently meeting expectations, or maybe you're not, right? There's room for improvement. Let's talk about the specific areas where we can work together to improve. Then you want to talk through the budget issues. This year, our budget for wage increases was limited compared to previous years. Not everyone is going to receive a raise. And in that situation, you've kind of brought to his attention that this might be happening. Given the current budget limitations, we had to tie raises to performance this year, and accordingly, we won't be able to offer you a raise this year. I know this is disappointing, especially now that since you've consistently received increases in the past. I want to help you get back on track. Let's set some clear goals and milestones for the next few months. I'm here to support you in every way. We'll schedule regular check-ins. We'll review your progress. We'll make whatever necessary adjustments that need to be made. And if you meet or exceed these goals, we can consider revisiting your compensation in the future. And then ideally, at the end of that conversation, you've achieved your goals of understanding, clarity, that strengthened trust, and actionable next steps. So we have another scenario to share.
All right. Well, now this one I think is probably going to be a little trickier, Lynn. So I'd like for you to think about, as I read this scenario, think about how you'd handle this situation, and then we're going to come back to it shortly. So you're going to have a moment to really contemplate your responses here. And so Jordan is an experienced and hardworking individual contributor who works for Alex. Jordan saw a job posting on the company website for the same position, but for a higher salary. Alex has heard that Jordan has started asking or talking with other team members about the ad, so Alex scheduled a meeting with Jordan to discuss. Alex doesn't want to lose Jordan, but the company needs to offer the salary range for a potential candidate. I know that's a tricky one, and I know many, many, many of our customers are dealing with this. So let's think about now, like I mentioned, once you think about how you'd handle this conversation, and then we'll give you maybe some best practices there. But let's dive into some common reactions to difficult conversations. Lynn, can you walk us through some of that?
Sure. And, we get these questions all the time. What happens if they cry? What happens if they scream? What happens if they go silent? All of these different things. What happens if? And this is probably one of the most asked questions when we're talking through how to have these difficult conversations. So with all difficult conversations, you want to focus on active listening and having empathy for the feelings that these conversations may generate. Remember too that you've prepared so much in advance for these conversations, but the employee may be hearing this for the first time. So what happens if the employee gets very emotional? I typically say don't get caught up in the emotion. Remain as objective as possible. You may want to slow the discussion, slow the pace down, modulate your voice, and really kind of continue to check in. If the employee is very emotional, think about rescheduling the meeting to give the employee a chance to collect themselves. I usually recommend reconvening within the hour so you don't lose momentum and that the employee still has time to regain their composure. I don't typically recommend stopping the conversation and rescheduling it for the following day. I feel that within the hour, the employee should be able to regain their composure and continue to have that open conversation. Don't leave it alone just because you don't want to deal with the emotions. Take a few moments, reassure the employee that you can have this open conversation, and then reconvene. What happens if the employee doesn't feel that you're qualified to discuss compensation? Again, this isn't ideal, but whether the employee thinks you're qualified or not, you are having this discussion because of your role. You may want to ask them why they feel that you're not qualified so you can address the concern directly. Don't get involved in a dispute. Don't get involved in a discussion about other people. They may ask for more information or clarity about how those compensation decisions were made, maybe what metrics were used, how they can meet the criteria in the future. And this goes back to your preparation. If the employee doesn't ask, this is a great place to offer some information about future career growth. Let's talk about some additional reactions on the next slide. All right, what happens if the employee becomes confrontational? We could kind of go into this for a really long time, but
we could spend a whole topic on this, couldn't we?
We could. This could. If we have an hour, we could take an hour. If we have 2 hours, we could take 2 hours. Again, try to remain objective. Don't get caught up in the emotion. Don't engage. Try not to raise your own voice. And if you feel that you are about to raise your own voice, take a breath, take a minute, take a step back. But try to modulate your voice to calm the employee. And usually what helps is if you advise them that they're acting inappropriately and ask for them to compose yourself. Sometimes I've just very calmly said, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but you're yelling at me. Most of the time that's enough for the employee to realize what they're doing and calm down. If the employee gets very negative or very violent, ask the employee to leave yourself. We can go into this, much more in depth, but only continue a rescheduled meeting in a safe environment if you have a third party that's available or appropriate. All right. So what happens if the employee perceives the compensation as unfair or unequal compared to peers? So this can lead to feelings of resentment and demotivation. You should be providing reassurance that you are committed to their future with the organization. Help them feel encouraged to work harder, strive for future rewards or recognition. We'll share some suggestions about that in a few minutes. And then lastly, we have one more common reaction. Now, let's say you're having a difficult conversation with someone and you're met with silence. We've got suggestions here to help navigate. This could be the employee's way of processing information based on their personality, their culture, or just the fact that they are kind of, seeing this or hearing about this for the very first time. You may want to slow down or reevaluate how you're approaching the discussion. I typically recommend asking open-ended questions to get a response. Sometimes the employee just needs time to internalize what you've said. They may not be able to respond immediately, and that's okay. You may want to ask them, provide you with their perspectives the following day, maybe in writing, maybe even schedule a follow-up meeting with them the following day to talk about their perspective once they've had a chance to think through their responses. So understanding and anticipating these reactions can help you manage the conversation more effectively, help your employees feel understood, respected, and truly heard. Having strong communication skills is very important for these types of conversations. So we have some additional tools to help you navigate. I'll have Kristen tell you about some more ways to make sure that you're being fair and consistent.
Thanks, Lynn. I love that trick about asking an employee to rate write their response. I think it's a brilliant way to help someone to process. So one of the tools that we want to talk about is developing or refreshing a compensation philosophy. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But another thing we want to look at is obtaining market rates for your organization, for up-to-date compensation data specific to your roles, geolocation, and industry. And you'll find typically there's a cost to this data. There are several resources, salary.com, Radford, Mercer. For TriNet PEO clients, there are two options for this data. There's a self-service via the Workforce Analytics or full service by the org dev team, which Lynn and I are members of. You're going to want to think about developing or creating pay bands for roles. More and more states and municipalities are regulating wage history inquiry and requiring pay transparency in job postings and when employees ask about their wages or the pay range of a position. Review the impact all employees have on your organization, paying close attention on those critical roles that could have the largest impact on your overall strategy. If, for example, poor engagement or unwanted turnover happens, these roles could be a good area to focus your budget dollars or an in-depth analysis of those market trends. And lastly, and perhaps most complex, is to perform a pay equity analysis, which we recommend you do in partnership with legal counsel to cloak the analysis with privilege. This effort helps your organization to get in front of unknown or maybe misunderstood pay discrepancies, allowing your leaders to have more confidence in your compensation decisions. We've listed a few things here that many organizations want to do, but may have limited internal bandwidth or budget. But one element we found to be reasonably easy to implement is a compensation philosophy. So let's just review that in a little more detail. So ultimately, your compensation philosophy can be the foundation for all of your internal policies and processes when it comes to compensation. The compensation philosophy typically answers two questions. What are your goals, your organization's goals in terms of your compensation, and why do you believe in those goals? Your compensation philosophy should detail the company beliefs, expectations concerning pay, benefits, rewards, recognition. It should be underscored by your company culture and reflect your organizational values. All right, so let's walk through some elements, what we see typically in a compensation philosophy. It can be instrumental, as mentioned, in ensuring your organization strategy aligns with your business objectives. A well-defined compensation philosophy can help attract, retain talent, maintain internal and external equity, and promote fairness and transparency. So a couple of highlights. We absolutely want this to align with your mission, vision, and values. You want to clarify what you want to achieve with your compensation program. This could be things like attracting top talent or retaining key employees or motivating performance, maintaining fairness. You also want to consider that compliance with equal pay law should be paramount in your philosophy. You'll want to think about how you want to position your organization in the market. Do you want to lead? Do you want to match? Do you want to lag the market rates for salary? And consider who are competing employers and how to handle those hard to fill roles. You can't forget your external circumstances. Since we're talking about communication, this whole topic around communication, please don't lose focus on how and when you'll communicate your compensation philosophy to employees. For TriNet clients who are joining this call, if you need help at developing this important guidance, please reach out to us, and a member of the org dev team will contact you for more information. All right, so now I gave you a teaser before with that other scenario, which is a tricky one, and let's circle back on that.
Sure. And this, like Kristen said, this type of situation is happening very often and more with pay transparency roles. So if you recall, Jordan saw a posting for their job role or for their role online, and the range was higher than Jordan's current salary. This is a pretty delicate situation, but with the right approach, Alex, the manager, can address Jordan's concerns effectively. So this is kind of a big slide. So we'll kind of go through a step-by-step guide for Alex with some example phrasing that we'll throw in there. So super, super important, prepare. Alex should review Jordan's job description. think in advance about what Jordan's current role and responsibilities are. Compare that to the posted role. Maybe it's different. If it's different, Alex can, really talk about how it's different and kind of go down that path of what that could look like. Alex should also be prepared to discuss non-monetary incentives, potential career growth opportunities with the company, training opportunities, work-life balance, recognition, all of those different things. And then back to that compensation philosophy, Alex should really understand the company compensation philosophy, what that policy is, what the rationale is behind the salary range for these new recruits. Setting the tone and starting the discussion, coming back to what do you hope to achieve? Remember, Alex doesn't want to lose Jordan. Alex will need to hear and really listen to Jordan's perspective. Alex's responsibility is to make sure Jordan understands the reasons for the pay disparity and the opportunities for Jordan to reach that compensation level or determine other ways of providing non-monetary incentives. Express appreciation and confirm understanding. Something like, hi, Jordan, thanks for coming in. I want to let you know how much we value the work that you're doing. You've been consistently performing at a high level, and I want to make sure that you know that we value your contributions and that those are noticed and appreciated. Having the discussion, start the discussion, address the elephant in the room, be clear and address the issue in a very straightforward way. I wanted to talk to you about something important. I heard that you saw a job posting that's offering a higher salary for the role similar to yours. Is that right? I understand that this might be concerning or confusing for you.
I love it. I think, Lynn, to your point, when you're talking about this, is how you're connecting the dots with just lean into the conversation, address the elephant in the room right from the get-go.
Yeah, I always feel that people can kind of take it if you're direct and empathetic and you're really focusing on making sure that you build that trust and understanding. So essentially, you want to be, again, transparent. You want to explain the context and whatever the situation is. So if it's a different role, you want to share relevant information about the company's compensation philosophy, how it applies to current employees versus new hires. The role that we're posting is different from yours in some ways. It requires some specific experience, some skills, or some qualifications that come with a different compensation structure. Let's talk a little bit about your current job description and how that differs. Or if it's the same, really go through that context. Why is the company offering a higher salary for new recruits? What are the market conditions? What are the employee locations? Maybe these people are located in a place with a higher cost of living. So the market has shifted since we hired for this role. We've had to adjust the compensation to remain competitive. It doesn't reflect on your performance or your value. Next step really is to address concerns. Acknowledge that disparity. Focus on retaining the employee. I want to have an open discussion with you about this because retaining you and knowing that you feel valued is important to me and the company. Let's talk about what we can do to bring your compensation in line with this new reality. And then, use your active listening skills. Allow Jordan to express their feelings, concerns without interruption. Acknowledge those feelings and concerns as legitimate. Those are their feelings. Think about other solutions. Explore solutions. Career growth opportunities. There's potential career growth for Jordan within the company, promotions, new responsibilities that could lead to a salary increase. And then, of course, consider adjustments. If it's possible, discuss immediate adjustments that can be made to Jordan's compensation to reflect that value to the company. If your organization is experiencing these types of scenarios often, you should consider incorporating some verbiage into your compensation philosophy about this. And you should also be thinking about whether to raise incumbent wages when posting wages for new positions. You want to avoid that wage inversion, potentially claims of discrimination. This kind of wage inversion can also decimate morale. And wage inversion is just a fancy way of saying that new incoming employees are going to be paid at or above existing employees. And then next steps in closing. Offer support, set goals. Please know that your contributions are very much recognized. If there's ways for us to further support your career growth or work together, I'm more than happy to discuss that with you. Now, I know this is a lot to absorb in a short time, so we want to recap a few important elements.
Thanks, Lynn. I know.
Sure.
I feel as we were developing this, because we feel so passionately about it, we're like, we need an hour. We want to have more time. So let's just walk through a couple of things. We hope that we've started you on your journey to have successful conversations about compensation, particularly if the outcome for the employee may not be expected or is different than what you've done in the past. We know that they can be challenging. We also know that with preparation, transparency, and empathy, we believe they can be resolved in a more successful manner. Lynn and I would love to thank you for taking the time to join us today. If there are any questions that maybe we were not able to get to, we will be reaching out to you shortly. If you found this session helpful, we'd love to invite you to some upcoming events, both in person or virtually.